What if I were to tell you that the future of medicine in the United States is increasingly and overwhelmingly female? And what if I were to tell you that as medicine skews female, the job of doctor has undergone a severe crapification, which has been to the benefit of a bunch of dudes? It's true. It's all that and worse. I can see that this topic is not making some of you happy, and I don't know, ladies, you'd look better if you smiled. Has anybody ever told you that? You should smile more. My understanding is that women love it when random men tell them to smile more. No? I'm getting a no. In any event, my name's Chris, and on this channel, Ignored Facts, I remember things because someone has to. What I recall from being a child in the 70s and then a tweener and teen in the 1980s was that doctors, and under that rubric, I'm not just talking about medical doctors, GPs, but also dentists and veterinarians, both of whom will loom large in this discussion, were typically men. For some reason, always old men. I would never even, middle-aged or older men, I would never even see younger doctors. I'm not sure where they hid those. And largely pretty well self-employed. I mean, if they weren't working at a hospital, they would have an office with their own name on it, or they would be in a partnership with their own name on it. And my wife actually reminded me that very often doctors' offices would be in a property where they lived in the house above the office, and they were definitely the employer and the boss. There was stability. There were people who had multiple generation, in some cases, relationships with that particular office. And this has largely gone away. This is something that has changed radically and gone away in my lifetime. I have seen these changes in my lifetime. You know, I've been a socioeconomic researcher on and off for decades now, and I like to take notice of trends. And a couple of the trends that I noticed were both that the independent medical office was going away, but also that there was a major tip where seeing somebody with the title of doctor, whether they were a specialist dealing with humans, a dentist, or a veterinarian, that typically this was skewing from a guy who was a lot older than me to a woman who was younger than me. That is a major change that has happened within my lifetime. This channel, however, is not called Ignored Anecdotes, right? It's called Ignored Facts. And so I did some digging. I did a considerable amount of research. It's been nearly a month since my last video, and I've got 14 dense pages of statistics to review, which back up precisely what I'm saying. Now, this is a sad tale in which we're looking at how women are now dominating medicine, trends which are necessarily going to increase. That is the flow of things, and we have the stats to prove that, and that they are increasingly working for a bunch of lesser educated finance bros, people who you have A+ overachieving students who are working for C- frat bros. Is the way that's gone, and it doesn't say a whole lot for the feminization of the workplace that as women have achieved in medicine, we've made the job of medicine worse. For some of you who are perhaps a female in medicine watching this is going to be unpleasant, probably not as unpleasant as your workplace. I might not be telling you anything that you already know. I may just be reinforcing things for you. You can think of this in a way as sort of tough love. Some of the recommendations that I'll make here at the end, and some of the questions I have as to how we got here or how we allowed ourselves to get here. But when I'm looking at people who are making $250,000 a year, $300,000 a year, even if you do have the student loans, and you have a professional degree, and you have some options in life, and you do have some degree of respect, when you live in a country where people have a minimum wage of $7.25 per hour pre-tax, and a lot of people never will see the advantages that you have and have had. There's an aspect of it that isn't really tough love so much as getting tough, because you're not the main character victims here. The patients and their families are the main character victims, as we'll also run through. And I'm going to say that, sisters, we need you to do better for yourselves, but we also need you to do better for the society, for your patients, for all of us. Well, the first thing that we probably have to do is dispel some myths about women's educational attainment in the United States historically. And the general impression that people probably have is that until relatively recently, men always had better education than women in American society. And this is something that's only very recently and is sporadically changed. And that's not true at all. Actually, the earliest statistics that we have for educational attainment come from the 1870s. And beginning in the 1870s, women have always outpaced men in American society in educational attainment, starting with and primarily with high school diplomas. It wasn't always as easy to get a high school diploma as it is now. I would argue, and perhaps this should be the subject of an entirely different video, that a holder of a high school diploma in 1930 or 1940 probably knew more about their world and had more practical math and other skills applicable to their world than a lot of people walking around with doctorates do in the United States today. Fewer people got a high school diploma, but most of the people getting a high school diploma throughout American history have been women. Since the 1870s, since we started really sort of standardizing public education and the issuance of these degrees, a lot of men who would leave school would leave school earlier because they were typically working with their hands, expected to marry early and be the breadwinner for those families and start putting together some amount of money aside so that you could start a family. And a lot of the jobs that men were going into did not require a high school diploma at all. So our earliest statistics from the 1870s show women staying in school a bit longer than men and outgaining them in high school diplomas. And this continues. If you look at 1940, for example, and I'm looking at statistics from the U.S. Census Bureau as well as the National Center for Education Statistics. If you look at the 1939-40 school year, there were over 642,000 graduating females, and while only 578,000 graduating males nationwide with a high school diploma. 1950, you have 570,000 graduating males versus 629,000 graduating males. In the 1969-70 school year, there were 1,430,000 graduating males with a high school diploma versus 1,459,000 females. And those statistics stopped being gathered. But if you look at Brookings Institute estimates for 2018, there was 82% on-time high school graduation for boys and 88% on-time graduation for girls. I've also seen statistics for 2020 suggesting that 90.6% of high school boys were expected to graduate with a diploma, whereas 91.3% of high school females were expected to graduate with a diploma. So consistently, for 150 years, women end up with more high school diplomas than men. The more stereotypical thing that would happen with men out achieving in educational attainment, women would come with college, with the 4-year undergraduate degree. And this was closer than you may expect as well. But it looks like most people, of course, did not go to college at all. And there were a lot of people, if you could picture, for example, Mrs. Robinson in the film The Graduate talking about her art degree when she was actually sort of going for her MRS degree, is the old joke. When you're talking about the rarefied air of the higher percentages, the top classes in American society, there were a lot of women who were sent to college as a sort of finishing school and as a way to meet a husband and for social purposes and not so much for education. I would argue that a lot of university education today in the United States continues to be for social purposes and as a class marker, as opposed for actual educational purposes, especially given how less and less is expected of most students in terms of even reading books. So that's a subject again for perhaps another video. And then when a lot of people, women who were from relatively more working class backgrounds or middle class backgrounds who would go to school, were shunted into some very specific areas. This would stereotypically be teaching, a teaching degree. There were what were known as teachers' colleges, a lot of which were state schools, most of which now have been renamed and rebranded universities and do have a wider degree of a wider scope of offerings than they used to. And you also had within high schools, certainly the case for my mother and my mother-in-law, who were graduates of high school in the early to mid 1960s. Both, as it turns out, did what was called a business course in high school, which was basically learning to be a secretary. There was stenography, and there was typing, and there were office skills, and the reading, writing, and arithmetic was centered around being probably a male's assistant in an office. That was female education at the high school level for a lot of working class women. So a lot of that still holds. And when you see the really big hump in males grossly overtaking women in terms of earning college diplomas, was in the post-war period, post-World War II, with the GI Bill in the 1940s and 50s. Much larger percentages of men who are from classes that would not normally attend college at all because of the GI Bill, were getting into college and graduating, and because of that GI Bill and that military experience, that skewed very, very heavily male. And this coincided with the upturn in American economics, right? The United States was really the only industrial country standing after World War II. I've read that somewhere around 51%, right in that area, of world industrial capacity was still standing unbombed after World War II, and the United States got this huge boost from being the one power that wasn't decimated by World War II. With that boost in the great golden age, the American century of the 20th century, you saw one income being able to feed a family and pay the rent, buy a house, and that one income was more often than not male. And you had more women who were expected to stay at home, raise the kids, that sort of thing. But even through that era, women were out gaining men in high school diplomas because a man could also go to work at a factory, in a mine, on the farm, what have you, and be able to feed that family and pay for that mortgage with a single income, working with one's hands, in a trade, in trades that didn't necessarily require secondary or post-secondary education. I feel like this is one of those issues, like so many that liberal America takes up, where they're right there at the ramparts, the tip of the leading spear of the proletariat on an issue that was already largely decided a generation or two ago. I feel like every 4 years at the Democratic National Committee that they're going to come out for Sunday movies. Like, we demand to be able to plunk down a nickel at the talkies and see Al Jolson on a Sunday. That's the kind of rebel I am. Things have skewed heavily female on college campuses. We are headed toward 58% of female admission to schools. It skews higher in many programs, especially for graduate programs. You will consistently see, I've looked at the data for the last several years, and you will consistently see that all of the top schools, the Ivies and the most competitive colleges and universities, will typically be admitting classes that are 51 or 52% female. It looks to me like there is not a college admissions officer in the United States, at least at a higher profile school, who is willing to put their name on an admission of more males than females, of 50.01% male. I think people would say that they were a tool of the patriarchy and they're simply not going to do that. I don't think you're ever going to see that again. I would say that exceptions are Christian schools. Obviously, they don't give a damn. Military academies really don't give a damn. And then there are the schools that are in financial trouble, circling the drain, where they will admit anybody with a pulse and a fresh, hot, pink social security number to load up with debt. They probably don't really care if the students, whatever the gender the students are, they're probably not too picky about that. But overwhelmingly, college campuses are skewing heavily female. And there are only a few areas left that are male-dominated. When you look at the S in STEM, science, which would be the hard sciences in general, biological and agricultural sciences, physical and related subfields like earth sciences, and Pew looked at this in 2018, and there were similar reports in 2020, and it looks like the aggregate of the S in STEM is skewing about 56% female. In fact, in the biological and agricultural sciences, it's about 62% graduating females right now. So what you might want to say is that you're looking to get more women in TEM. Because the TEM area of STEM is lagging some. Now, in technology, which is largely computer and information sciences, data from 2022 and 2020 estimates have it between 21 and 26% of graduates are female. In engineering, it looks like graduates in 2022 were about 23% female. And mathematics, and this one is inexplicable. It looks like data from 2018 through 2020, according to Pew, about 42% of graduates are currently female in mathematics, and that's actually down. Somehow that's down. The peak seemed to be about 1997, 1998. It looks like about 47% of mathematics graduates were female. And somehow the result of 30 years of luncheons and Facebook shares and all of that other things to get more women into STEM has somehow resulted in a measurable 5 to 10% decline of mathematics graduates being women. We also have to keep in mind it was probably a man that figured that out. So a reason that I took the time to run through historical educational attainment statistics is that it seems to me that we require some form of extraordinary external pressures like the extreme sexism of the 19th century or the early 20th century or the GI Bill in order to compel women not to achieve and to overtake men in the classroom. There appears to be something about Western society's classroom learning model that women tend to excel at, tend to generally do better than men with. And I really am of the opinion that a lot of the people who talk about getting more women in STEM are absolutely correct, that it's probably simply social factors and women's preference that keeps them from being a majority of people in mechanical engineering or IT or those other spaces. Women first outnumbered men in veterinary school enrollments around 1984, 1985. And this became just consistent and overwhelming by the 1990s. By the year 1990, 65% of veterinary school graduates were female. It has been above 80% since 2000. It's estimated that women are earning about 81% and perhaps as high as 85% of veterinary degrees in the United States. Now, I interviewed a veterinarian who happened to be a woman about 5 years ago for a community radio station, and I brought this up to her, the dominance of women in the field, and she mentioned that anecdotally she understood a recent University of Minnesota veterinary school graduating class had a 100% female graduating class. So this would have been 6 or 7 years ago. I've not been able to independently verify that, but it would not shock me. So those are the kind of numbers that we're seeing. Women seem to have surpassed 50% of dental school graduates around the year 2018, but this is rapidly increasing. In 2021, 51.6% of graduates of American dental schools were female. 54.3% in 2023, 55.6% in 2024. So this is ratcheting up in dentistry rapidly. You are going to see a little bit of gap in time between as older male dentists retire and die, and they are replaced with female dentists, but it is rapidly approaching. You're going to see 60% or more of dentists being female very soon. And in the medical field, just general practitioners and doctors as a whole, women seem to reach parity in medical school graduation in the early 2000s, sometime around the year 2003 to 2007. Women began to surpass men in getting MDs, but in the early 2020s, you begin to see this push and growth of it going beyond 52% female, and that's rapidly again going to go to 60% and beyond. There is a bit of a gap of time that's unusual in the medical field because of the fact that people will do a residence. So there's sort of this extended period of time. Also, veterinary school is 4 years. Dental school, I believe, is also going to be a minimum of 4 years. And you have people doing specializations and residencies in which there's a little bit of an extra gap of a few years there to several years before you see the doctor that's attending to you being the doctor who graduated from school. But you are definitely going to see in the near future that 60 to 85% of people with the title of doctor in all of these fields are going to be women. And at the same time that this is occurring, those women are going to be working for men who are objectively less bright than them, but happen to have a job in finance. And and we have a tendency in our society to pay people more who handle money because they handle money, irrespective of the fact that their jobs might not be more difficult, they may not be more critical. In fact, in this case, they're not critical at all. You'll never hear anybody saying in a restaurant, on an airplane, "Oh my God, my baby isn't breathing. For the love of God, is there a finance bro in the house?" Never hear that. People in finance have 0% of a necessary position in giving medical care, and in fact, as we're about to see, they often are the barrier between getting effective, efficient, fairly priced medical care or medical care at all. In fact, we can negatively correlate the involvement of private finance in medicine with medical outcomes. Let us make no mistake that people who graduate from medical programs are statistically, on balance, considerably smarter than the people in private equity that they are increasingly working for. According to SAT scores, if we look at NCES data for high school seniors from 2017, mean total SAT score of people who are intending to go into the biological and biomedical sciences, it's an 1132 out of 1,600, and people looking to go into business management and marketing are averaging a 1072. We also see from ACT scores that health sciences and technologies, pre-med, dental, and vet proxy tend to score a 22. People going into the hard biological sciences and research tend to score a 24. These are ACT scores. And people looking to go into engineering, 24. People looking to go in business tend to score a 21. There is a consistent, when you look at studies such as the Hauser study in 2002, there is a historical consistency to this. A 2014 analysis of SAT scores by major from College Board data ranked physical sciences, math, STEM, and pre-med adjacent. The highest scores having over 1,200 scores combined, while people going into business averaged between 1050 and 1100. There's also a similar 2015 Quartz analysis of these data sets. And then you start to see people doing IQ estimates by field or profession in which people who are undergraduate majors in finance and business administration tend to have about a 110 estimated IQ score. Graduate students in business and MBAs, median 120 IQ score, whereas people in medicine and physicians tend to have between a 124 and 130 score. Dentistry students tend to have about a 120 score. And there are a variety of data for this. I have never seen any data which suggests that people who go into finance tend to be smarter than people who tend to go into medicine. However, when we look at who is working for whom, who ends up doing the necessary work and who ends up profiting from it, whose salaries and job qualities end up dropping while other people who are completely not necessary to the process end up getting all of the profit, I can only refer to the greatest of all American philosophers, one Forestus Gumpus, who was quoted as saying that stupid is as stupid does. There is data on private equity firms and who they are comprised of, and private equity firms at the C-suite level and at the people making finance decisions tend to be between 87 and 90% male. So you have a situation in which you have younger veterinarians who tend to be female, typically working for private equity chains in which they, as the workforce, are 85% or more female, and their bosses, who have less education and are on average, on paper, less bright people, are 87% and higher male. These are women who are put to work on literal city street corners, and in which case their boss, who is not necessary to the process, pays for things up front for them, does the enforcement of bill collection, and says, you just turn the money over to me and you don't worry your pretty little head. If you need anything in the way of equipment, or you need, Daddy Chad is going to help you finance that, and Daddy Chad is going to take care of the business end of things so that you don't have to worry about it. And you best get Chad his money. What exactly is private equity? Well, private equity is the latest incarnation of the vampire squid of American capital. Private equity refers to investment firms that pull large amounts of capital from wealthy individuals, pension funds, and institutions to acquire ownership stakes in private companies, not publicly traded, with the goal of increasing their value and then selling them for a profit. This typically happens within 3 to 7 years. So usually private equity funds will take over a brick and mortar type business that provides goods or services, and very often they load them with debt in a manner that seems that it can't possibly be legal, and then they sell off profitable portions of these companies. In many cases, they tend to suck the marrow out of them, suck the value out of them, and sell off parts or sell them off entirely. And when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to the physical and emotional pain that people are experiencing because they need a root canal or because their dog has been hit by a car, private equity has discovered that what can be even more profitable than their usual, sucking the marrow out of a manufacturing corporation, let's say, and leaving the husk. What can be even more profitable for them is engaging in America's greatest pastime, which is not baseball, but exploitation. There are a wide variety of negative patient outcomes in health due to private equity investment. When they invest in medical specialist offices such as dermatology, gastroenterology, and so forth, dental practices, veterinary clinics, it is always associated with severe adverse health effects for patients, and all of the metrics show this. There's an increased risk of complications and mortality, and in PE-acquired hospitals and nursing homes, patients experience higher rates of hospital-acquired conditions, 25% overall increase in those, including 27% more falls, 38% more central line associated infections, surgical site infections that doubled in some cases. Nursing home residents under PE ownership face an 11% higher likelihood of emergency visits or hospitalizations for preventable conditions. And Medicare patients see a 10% higher 90-day mortality rate compared to non-private equity facilities. There's often understaffing, meaning it looks like an 11.6% average drop in full-time employees, meaning that they are squeezing 11.6% more work out of doctors, and that workforce is again increasingly female. You're seeing more older established physicians who are in private practice or partnerships where they are doing less work, but they are also getting compensated a lot more for it. And doing the research on that, it seems that a lot of the younger physicians who are typically female, younger dentists, younger veterinarians, coming into these places are earning somewhere between $150,000 and $300,000 per year, whereas older doctors who are typically male and are part of a partnership can easily see a $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 return a year for, it appears, even doing 12% less work. This is very definitely a feminization of the crapification of the job of doctor, and it is bad for women, obviously, that are in these fields, but it's catastrophic for patients. There are also price increases. Studies show that PE ownership raises prices by 4 to 20% in what were private physician practices, and raise prices 7 to 16% in hospitals. There's a 16% boost in prices in oncology, which is not exactly optional for people. 18% for gastroenterology, 13% in dermatology. Dental and veterinary practices follow suit, and their price hikes, it appears, up to 32% in the bills. I have seen the horrible phrase used in veterinary practices, which is called fiscal euthanasia. It is a term referring to the fact that some people are having their pets put down not because the pet's life can't be saved, but because it's too damn expensive for the family to save the pet's life. And you really have people over a barrel when they come into the office, into the practice, and they have excruciating tooth pain. Their dog's been hit by a car. They need a lump removed and examined, and so forth. I will say, too, that there are a lot of women who might be watching this who are in the medical field who are bristling at the lack of respect that you're feeling, and you may think that it's because you're not being respected because you're a woman. I would say that's certainly the case if your boss is a private equity finance bro. They probably have had meetings in which they thought, you know, we can get a stable of bitches and we can get them under control. I could see that happening, but I think that what's happening when you're having patient interactions in which you're feeling that you're not getting the respect that you should be getting as a doctor, I think this is because working class people, which is to say most people, it's the background that I'm from, certainly. I'm the first kid in my family to go to college. I think working class people, because they have had to their entire lives, innately can read the power dynamic in a workplace. And there's a big difference between going to a doctor where the doctor's name is on the sign, or you know that's the partnership, or that's the relationship that your family has had for decades. There's a huge difference between that and feeling like the person that you're talking to is not the boss, that the person that you're talking to has less literal leeway in their job than a 19-year-old assistant manager at Burger King. Less control of pricing, less control of procedure. We know when Becky at the desk, who actually works for corporate, these jobs that they've created at these private equity clinics, that we see that there are people who really don't have anything to do with medicine, who are there to manage the expectations, do the billing, and manage the complaints that are inevitable from patients and their families. And we know that Becky is in charge, that Becky is the assistant manager of the Burger King, and that you are a line cook on the Burger King. And I mean, once again, you're smarter. You did more work. You're the one with the student loans. You're the A+ student. I know who you are. I see you. I know who you are. I was pre-vet med, and I lived at home. I commuted to an Ivy League university. It wasn't going to be in the cards for me. I couldn't figure out how to pay the bills and go to school for a 4-year degree, let alone go to veterinary school and everything that came after that. I switched majors to something in the liberal arts, and I kicked butt in that, and got a job. I'm old enough that you were able to get a job after college, if you can imagine such a thing. For some of you millennials and younger, it's very surprising to hear that that was a possibility, but you could still do that in the early 90s. So I know who you are. You're overachievers, is what you are. You are A+ students. You went to the state finals in volleyball, and you might not even like volleyball, but you thought it would look good on your college application, so you stuck with it. You're doers and achievers, and I know that you can do better than this. Now, one of the things that we see with private equity is that salaries are often tied to the outcome of the finances for the clinic. Now, that's also true if you're in ownership, but this is a very different animal. There are performance-based metrics that some physicians, some people with the title doctor, are meeting, and that their salary is sometimes partially based in that. It can also be based in profit sharing, and there are metrics, so it's performance-based. So we're not doing medicine, we're doing a performance. Gentlemen, put your hands together for Dr. Candy on the main stage. There seems to be no question whatsoever that as the job of medicine becomes increasingly feminized, that we've made the job worse. We have lowered salaries. We have created a glass ceiling in which you're looking at not really having the ability for that partnership or that ownership. And the difference in salaries as a result is marked. You're looking at a drop of between $100,000 and $300,000, $400,000 per year per physician in the difference between being an independent or partnership operator of your own office and being an employee of a private equity firm. Now there is the security, there's the ability to know that you have a job and to pay those student loans and to have a salary. But I really think that people can do better than this. Once again, you are smarter objectively than the people who are running private equity. It's a bunch of finance bros that are taking advantage of you and taking advantage of the general public. And we need a fight back. Where they are living is that gap of $100,000 to $400,000 less per year that a physician is making. You start totaling that up, and you begin to understand that it well pays the private equity firm to invest in something where they've got Becky, who's working for corporate at the desk, making a lot of decisions and really lording things over the patients and the doctors. Because you have the ability if there are 10 physicians at a practice and there's a $400,000 gap in their salary per year, and that's you're looking at $4 million a year extra money, you can hire somebody for $50,000 to sell everybody out. That's very easily done. It's the great American tradition of the crab pot, in which you can always hire somebody to pull somebody else back into the pot. We can do better than this. I tend to think that that physicians, people who graduated from medical school, dental school, veterinary school, you can do a business plan. You can figure out ways to pool money. You can figure out ways to do cooperative things in which if 5 or 10 of you got together, you could figure out ways to go into partnerships, get yourself some loans for that equipment, which I know is very expensive, while you're also paying off your student loans. I just think you could do better. And I did some research to try and figure out who is doing better, or who is trying to fight back. I was hoping to see that there was a specific women in medicine group that was specifically trying to take on private equity. And I found something that was just so demoralizing. I looked at the American Medical Women's Association. I looked at their website in hopes that there was something regarding private equity and how they were going to band together against it, and sisterhood was going to be powerful. And when I searched on the words private equity, what I actually found was a suggestion that women take some of their salaries and invest in private equity firms. Because once again, Americans' favorite pastime is figuring out how to leverage exploitation and pull the other crabs down in the crab pot. Now there is a wonderful group called Take Medicine Back, which is a physician-led advocacy group fighting corporate control of medicine, including PE acquisitions. They push for bans on non-compete clauses, for transparency and ownership, and policies to protect independent practices. Since 2025, they were hosting webinars and petitions targeting PE's effects on physician autonomy and patient outcomes. That is wonderful. It is not specifically a woman-led initiative. However, definitely something to look at. So Take Medicine Back. We can link to that. Physicians for a National Health Program does highlight PE's takeover of women's healthcare, criticizing profit motives that lead to higher costs, facility closures, and that sort of thing. So that is all wonderful. I did also see, and I'm going to link to it, another group that I thought initially was something that was led by physicians, but is in fact the website-driven organization by a family which had a horrible health outcome for their dog, whose body was held for a $12,000 or $13,000 ransom, and is looking to get PE out of veterinary medicine. But again, this seems to be run by a family that doesn't even include a veterinarian and that sort of thing. So it's a sad case. You might not like a lot of my blunt metaphors. I'm hoping maybe to prod at some of you women who are very bright, very accomplished, and again need to be doing better, not just for yourselves, but for society at large. But I will reiterate the thesis statement of this video, which is that as medicine continues to get more female, medicine, the job, and its outcomes get worse. And it's because a relatively small group of less bright finance bros have decided to lord it over you. And we as a society, including the female physicians, have let it happen. On that bright note, if you'd like to be regularly depressed, by all means, hit like and subscribe. I'd love to hear from people in the comments. I expect any number of excuses, because that is one of America's other great pastimes, is coming up for reasons why verbing nouns is too hard. Take it easy, folks.